All right, Sean Williams and the incomparable Justin Angel back for another episode of VandySports.com on our YouTube channel, where we are breaking down the spring rosters that were recently updated for Vanderbilt Commodores. Obviously, first year under Clark Lee, going to get started in the spring. I don't think the dates have been set on that yet, but I expect them to get started here sometime here pretty soon. But we have talked about offensive line, defensive line, running backs, and now we're going to turn our attention to linebackers. So if you like what we're doing, and a lot of you said you do, we appreciate the feedback. Best thing you can do is give us a like on YouTube. Hit the like button and hit the notification bell to subscribe to our channel. Whenever we drop these new videos, they will give you a notification. You can watch them at your leisure. And obviously, we'll share these. We share all these on VandySports.com. That's where you can find a lot of our content for football, basketball, baseball coverage, and recruiting coverage as well. VandySports.com. If you're not signed up, please do. A yearly subscription is $9.95 a month. Pretty good deal for some insider feedback on Vanderbilt Commodores. And if you're really special, get that $9.95 a day plan.
Yeah. The old Chris Lee plan. Yep.
Yeah, Chris Lee plan. Drop some knowledge on there. Super chats and everything. Get on AOL Messenger and knock some stuff out.
Absolutely.
All right. So we're going to turn our attention, obviously, to the linebackers and talk about the updated roster of the linebackers. Obviously, defensively, not a good year last year for Vanderbilt. Biggest glaring stat was they finished 121st in the NCAA in total defense. And they gave up 487.4 yards per game. So, linebacker was a huge problem. Your cat is back there exploring things.
What are we doing?
He's excited, man.
He ain't been in this room in forever.
He knows some knowledge is being dropped, and he wants to hear it. So
absolutely, he's fired up at spring practice for Vanderbilt. He knows Clark Lee in town. He's excited about it. So.
He's looking outside the window, make sure Clark Lee's not out there right now with a whistle, and trying to get Justin out there to do some drills, Oklahoma drills.
No, I'm too old for that. I mean, I can't make it through a bowling season without getting hurt every week. So.
All right, so obviously struggles last year for the defense all around, but linebackers and specifically Dimitri Moore definitely struggled, and then he ended up transferring. Didn't get a lot of great effort out of him, but there were some positive.
That was the theme before the season. He opted out. Everybody was, really distraught over that because he was a draft prospect and some all SEC accolades a little bit, and then he opts back in. Everybody gets excited, and then the year starts, and he just did not have a very good year, and then he eventually opted out, and then I thought the linebacker play actually got better. So
there you go. And speaking of linebacker play getting better, Ethan Barr, kind of emerged as a key player for them, and he kind of surprised as a true freshman. And he had 37 tackles. He averaged almost a little over 4 tackles a game, and then he had a career high 10 tackles against Missouri. So he really had a kind of a nice little breakout year, and a surprising as a true freshman too.
Right, and then like if we were doing this last year at this time. Before spring practice, Ethan Barr probably would have been, kind of an afterthought because he was a late ad. He didn't have a whole lot of offers coming out of high school. And
right.
He gets on campus and they put him in there. And, it was pretty noticeable as soon as he got in there, he started making plays, He wasn't extremely fast. I think he's, limited a little bit physically, but, he's big, and he just seems to be in the right spot. He made a lot of tackles. I thought, he was definitely a bright spot for a bad defense this past year, but it was good to get him that experience moving forward.
Yeah, like I said, he might not have the measurables, but hey, it seems like he's got some good instincts at the linebacker position, and definitely took advantage of that. So, another emerging star was Anthony Orchy. We talk a lot about Austin Orchy, and maybe hasn't lived up to the billing, at least from what he was rated coming out of high school. But his brother, his younger brother, comes in here. He was kind of classified as a safety, and then he comes in here and he makes the move to linebacker, and lo and behold, last year he leads the team in tackles. Had a phenomenal season, 66 tackles, 1.5 tackles for loss, and a sack. So, yeah, he had 13 tackles against Tennessee, so he finished the season strong. So, he's kind of one of those guys that's, probably emerged as a surefire starter at the linebacker position, one of the linebacker positions for Vanderbilt.
Yes, and, when he was getting recruited, I don't know if anybody was on Vandy Sports and remembered at that time, we predicted that he would eventually make the move to linebacker. And,
right.
We caught a little bit of heat for that because everybody told us that
Did you?
he was definitely going to be a safety. So, yeah, there was people that told us he's going to be a safety and he's not going to play anything else. That's what he is. He is a Cam Chancellor type player. That's something that we had heard and was told. But, you could just tell with his skill set that he could eventually end up playing linebacker. I thought it would be more like an outside linebacker, surprisingly playing inside. But something to add to that is I just like the fact that you take a safety and you move him down to linebacker. Those guys are typically faster, and then you get more production out of it.
Right.
I've already said this before, but that was always one of my gripes with something that Derek Mason, he was always really big on length and being tall and doing those things. And that's great. You can't be just tiny or really, really small because people will line up and run the football on you at will. But you also got to be able to run. You got to be fast.
Right.
And, having someone like Anthony Orchy there that can move and can run, I think it's something that helps him out there.
Yeah, and just, obviously you mentioned heat, and I think it's kind of funny. It just goes to show you that we're all experts in our own mind, so.
Yeah, yes.
In terms of where we think people are going to end up on the roster and positions and everything. But, yeah, Anthony Orchy, I think he's definitely solidified himself as he's going to be a starter at one of the linebacker positions inside. So, I think you can kind of write that down and, stamp that. Another interesting thing is obviously Folletti Afamui. I don't know how to, properly say his last name, but we'll just call him Folletti. But obviously he opted out last year. That was kind of big for Vanderbilt. That was another big hole to fill for them. You mentioned 2019 he started 10 games, and he had 46 tackles. So he was a really key contributor for the Commodores in 2019. Opted out last year. He is back on the roster this year. So to have him back is pretty significant for Vanderbilt. And obviously, he's probably going to make a play for a starting position at the linebacker spot. He was starting in 2019 as well.
Right, and he's got production there, and he's got experience, and he's played, and something he's able to do is he runs pretty well. And, just looking at this linebacker group, something I'm looking forward to see, because sometimes in college football you see at different programs and things like that, guys that have an abundance of talent, but then you don't really see it on the field. And then a new coaching staff comes in, and can they tap into that and get that person to play above their capabilities? And that's something I'm looking forward to seeing with Austin Orchy. Because, if you remember when we saw him at Friday Night Lights, what was it, Sean, 3-4 years ago?
Right.
He looked like a Southeastern Conference linebacker coming out of high school.
Yeah.
I just think it'd be interesting to see if Clark Lee is able to get in there and work with him and get the light to turn on and see if he can play up to his ability. And, and that's something we talk about. The linebacker play was not great by any stretch last year. Granted, the corner play wasn't really good last year. You could also say at times the defensive line play wasn't good. And, overall, it's just a bad defense for the most part.
To sum it up, yeah.
If you watched it, it was pretty painful to watch. And, it's the thing when you were talking about the stats from the running backs, and when we were talking about that, I was like, man, I don't remember the offense being that bad. And then I just got to thinking, well, it's because it was bad, but it was still better than what the defense was doing.
Right.
So,
Right. Yeah.
But if you look at all these guys, I mean, you got Clark Lee, who is a linebacker guy, and he
Exactly.
is definitely going to be paying attention to what this group is doing. And I do think there is some talent here. It's just not proven and really did a whole lot on the field just yet. You know, and part of that is Anthony Orchy hasn't played the position very long, or Ethan Barr is just going into, you know, as a true sophomore.
Right.
But, you know, there is some talent to work with there.
Yeah, I mean, we obviously mentioned Folletti coming back. I think that'd be interesting to see how that plays out. But you mentioned Austin Orchy. We talked a lot about him. We saw him at Friday Night Lights. I saw him at the 5-star camp in Indianapolis whenever he was entering his senior season. Looks great, phenomenal kid.
Yes,
you know, we just haven't seen a lot of production out of him. I mean, last year he played in 7 games. He did get 2 starts against A&M and LSU. Had 16 tackles. 4 tackles for loss, or 4 tackles against LSU and Missouri in those games. So, you know, you mentioned Clark Lee. I think that's kind of a wild card just in terms of Austin Orchy and kind of seeing production from him. You talk about Clark Lee being a linebacker-specific coach. You know, that's kind of his bread and butter, at least, you know, in the coaching realm of what he's coached. So I'm kind of interested to see how much production he can get out of a guy like Austin Orchy, who we've kind of expected a little bit more from so far in his career at Vanderbilt. So that'd be interesting to kind of watch going forward.
Right. And we don't know as far as like scheme wise, you know,
Yeah.
sometimes, you know, certain guys just don't fit into certain schemes. You know,
Right.
it's not that they're a bad football player or, you know, anything like that. It's just the fact that, you know, what they do well does not fit into what you're trying to do, which I know linebackers, it's a little bit different because, you know, most of the time linebackers playing a linebacker, but, you know, it still has a little bit of an effect. And like you said, I mean, it is going to be interesting to see what he does with this group defensively.
And you mentioned, scheme. I think, we're kind of thinking, hey, 4-3. You know, there's a lot of unknowns there in terms of what we're actually going to see from the defense and everything like that. But just kind of talk about that. We talked about it a little bit before we hit record, but what do you kind of see from this scheme? I know just in terms of from what we're kind of expected to see from the linebacker position and how they line up.
Right. I think technically it'd be called a 4-3, but with offenses nowadays with how much spread, hurry up, do all of these things. Majority you're probably going to end up seeing a 4-2-5. So you're going to have a nickel out there that's playing kind of your star position and doing those things, which I like because it gets more speed on the field and that's what you need. But that's kind of what I see with them. And the days of people lining up and 21 personnel and running ISO just down the downhill at you and just saying, all right, here it comes, stop it. Those days you don't see that a whole lot. Now, Stanford's probably going to do that a little bit, and they're going to have to put some big bodies in there to stop them because they are going to come in and put about 3 tight ends out there and say, all right, we're fixing to run power to the right here. Good luck. Stop it. Okay. All right. Because that's what they do. But that will typically what you see nowadays. What you see now is, Ole Miss with Levy down there and how they throw the football. And, you're going to see that at Tennessee with Heupel. He's going to do the exact same thing. This is kind of how football has evolved with the RPO game and those things. So you're going to see the 4-2-5. And that's why I think, people like, if you're going to defend RPOs and do those things, I think it's very important that you have somebody like Anthony Orchy that's played safety, that's moved down to linebacker, that can run and do those things. I mean, it makes you a little bit more versatile defensively when you're trying to stop those things.
Yeah, I agree. You mentioned versatility. I mean, not to keep harping on Anthony, but I mean, that's a versatile player right there. You talk about him playing safety and then moving to inside linebacker and having a successful season last year. So I think another interesting thing is something we talked about before we hit record, and we mentioned it in the defensive line roster breakdown, is what's going to happen with Elijah Mcallister here and Michael Owusu. They are prime candidates to maybe be defensive ends in this new defense. So maybe talk about that a little bit, Justin.
Well, we talked about in the defensive line video the point of emphasis is going to have to be finding a pass rush. If you lose Dio Odingbo and you lose Andre Mance, who I thought too were really good football players that really played exceptionally well along the defensive front. When you lose those two and then you start looking at what you have defensive end wise, you don't really have a ton of guys that are fast twitch that's going to be able to put pressure on the quarterback. And if you're not putting pressure on the quarterback, it makes it extremely hard to play defense. And then just, Elijah Mcallister, when he's been healthy, has been a solid player. I just see him mostly with a hand in the dirt and doing those type things. And Michael Owusu's kind of in the same boat with that. Right. And both of those guys, I just think that defensive end is probably the route that they go. Just from our perspective right now, honestly, I don't really know. I don't know what Clark Lee looks for, defensively and what his guys have looked at, because, it's hard to tell when you're at a school like Notre Dame because of the type of kids that they are able to recruit is typically different than what Vanderbilt brings in. I think that was, when Derek Mason came in from Stanford, he tried to bring the exact same recruiting approach that he had there to Vanderbilt. And it just, it didn't work out because it's hard to find those 6'6", 6'7", defensive tackles / defensive ends that, play defensive tackle in your 3-4 defense.
Right.
You got those guys at Stanford. But Vanderbilt, those guys are hard to come by. So as far as, comparing to what Clark Lee had at Notre Dame, I don't really know what he's going to be looking for. Now, in a couple of years, that'll definitely change. We'll have a much better idea of what he's looking for, and we'll be able to answer that much better. But just, off of what we know right now, I would just say Owusu and Mcallister are probably defensive ends.
Yeah, I agree with you with that. I mean, just based off their size and length and everything. But that's the fun thing about doing these roster breakdowns and having a new staff coming in. There's a lot of unknowns. But you mentioned playing time, and that obviously they signed 3 linebackers in this past year's class. So these guys are going to be coming in, and we talk about Michael Mincy, Arrington Truesdale, a guy you're extremely high on. You can talk about him here in a second, and Miles Capers. What are the chances you see these guys? I mean, the linebacker position struggled a lot last year. Are these guys going to have an opportunity to play early right here?
I would just think, just looking at how young the linebacking core was this past year, you would just think that these guys would have a shot to play early. And then when you're looking at it, we talked about it when we talked about the 2021 class with the linebackers. You have guys here that's got very different skill sets. We got Michael Mincy, who's more of an in the box type guy, which is similar to what Ethan Barr is. Ethan Barr's a kind of in the box type linebacker. He just seems to have a knack for getting downhill and stopping inside zone and other things. And then you got Arrington Truesdale, who I think, I always harp on speed, but Truesdale is one that can run. He can really get out there, and he can play in space. He can do those things. And then you got Miles Capers, who is 6'4". He's got a lot of length to him, and he's able to play in space as well. Typically you don't think big, tall guys, hey, he can cover, get back in pass coverage and do those things. But, Miles Capers has shown that ability. So, it'll be interesting to see. But I think they have a shot to get some playing time, because I do think that was a good haul there in this 2021 class with that group.
Yeah, I agree. It'd And I think they'll have a shot. You know, I mean, you talk about Arrington Truesdale. I know that's a guy you really like, and I do too. I mean, that guy's sideline to sideline speed guy.
Yes.
So I mean, you could probably. I'm curious to see if he'll have an impact, and Mincy as well, and Capers has length. So they've got some good linebacker options coming in this freshman class. I'm kind of curious to see if they'll hit the field this first year. So anything else to add to the linebacker positions before we head out, Justin?
Well, we didn't mention Braden Devault Smith, you know, the good local product from Pearl Cone. You know, he's had some experience in there, and he's played. He's been mostly a special teams guy, but I think he does a really good job on special teams. So that's somebody we need to mention. And then the only other one that I could think could possibly help the linebacking position would be Ricky Wright.
Yes.
You know, he started out at safety, but he has that body type. If he gets in the weight room and he adds some weight to him, then, you know, you're looking at a 6'4", 220-pound guy that could play some linebacker as well. And then, you know, then we're starting to talk about the Anthony Orchy, you know, kind of how he went from safety to linebacker. Now you have another one here. Now, that's not saying that's going to happen, because I thought Ricky Wright did. When he played safety this past year, I thought he did a good job, especially for a true freshman playing in that situation. But he has that body type that he could move down if needed.
Well, I mean, he's listed as an athlete, so obviously the previous staff does, and this staff does too. They think he's versatile, so he can play multiple positions. So that's definitely a factor. And you mentioned Braden Devault Smith. I will mention, I mean, he played in 8 games last year. 16 tackles, 2.5 tackles for loss, 1 sack. He had 6 tackles against Florida, so definitely a guy you can plug in there and get some good reps out of coming up. So, and a guy with experience too. I mean, I think he's 5th-year senior as well. So, that'll do it for our linebacker kind of breakdown of the spring roster. We appreciate you guys checking us out. Always check out our roster breakdowns, and we did a football 2021 recruiting class breakdown of every position. Check that out at our YouTube channel. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Whenever these pop up, you can watch them at your convenience. And as always, go to vandysports.com and give us and if you're not a member, please join vandysports.com. I am on there. Justin Angel's on there from time to time. Chris Lee is on there too. Great football, basketball, baseball coverage, recruiting coverage as well. Vanderbilt's offering a lot of dudes right now, so Clark Lee and his staff is getting after it on the recruiting trail, so we're trying to keep up with all that on the site there. So vandysports.com, we appreciate you guys checking us out. Stay tuned for more content.